Hi there, it's Scott Nicholson. Welcome to session number 21 in the Gaming in Libraries course. And today we're going to answer the critics. So as I've been doing this for a while, I've gotten questions from critics about why we're doing gaming. And so I thought I'd present some of the questions I've gotten and some of the answers that I've used. You'll have to tweak these to make them fit in your setting, but at least they'll give you some ideas. And as always, if you have other questions that you've been asked or other ways to answer these questions, please visit the Connect, ALA Connect, and tell us about it. That's really one of our goals. So one of our big things that we get is, what do games have to do with books? Well, I was actually asked this question by a New York Times reporter, and my original answer in my head, my snarky answer was, well, what do libraries have to do with books anyway? I didn't say that. I could see the headlines, Syracuse professor says, libraries have nothing to do with books. But as you know, libraries are about a lot more than books today. They're about a lot of different services that are out there. And so gaming is an information container, just like movies, just like music. As if libraries support these other forms of recreation, then it makes sense to support games. For many of our users, gaming is their primary form of information recreation. And so games are that next step beyond movies and music. It just ties right in with the stuff that we're doing. Now, one question I get is, why is the library interested in gaming now? And my answer to that, if you'll remember back from one of our earlier lessons, libraries have been interested in gaming for a long time. We've been supporting games since the 1850s. It's nothing new. The activity of playing games in libraries has been going on. People have been playing chess and doing community jigsaw puzzles and doing games in the kids section for a long time. What has changed is the emphasis of society on games. And so as that has increased, then the attention to places where people play games has increased. If you think about our computing centers. When we had early computers, games were the way you learned how to use them. How many of you got dysentery on the Oregon Trail at a local library? That should be a t-shirt. I think it is, actually. But anyway, so we've been interested in gaming for a long time. Now, another question is, isn't gaming noisy and disruptive? Well, yes, but so are libraries. Libraries of today are much more noisy places than they have been in the past. In fact, the places where you are noisy in the library have really flipped. It's now, they have a quiet space in the library marked no cell phone, quiet space, and then everything else is noisy. People are working together in groups, people are chatting. I was over in Amsterdam, and they had a piano in the library, and people were playing the piano, and it was actually very nice. It provided this nice community feeling, this community space. So while gaming is noisy and disruptive, it fits right in with many other noisy and disruptive services the library is offering. Aren't games violent? Now, I talked about a little of this a few episodes ago. Yes, there are violent games, but there are also lots of non-violent games. But there is just as much violent content that we have sitting on the shelf in print form and in movies. And so we already support violence. It's already out there. And we have policies to deal with it. We have in our library policies that represent the desires of our community on how we deal with this sort of violent material. And gaming just fits right along the side of it. So if you wouldn't show Pulp Fiction up on the big screen, well, then you probably shouldn't put Mortal Kombat up on the big screen. You should use the same sort of policies that you use in deciding what movies to show to decide what games to play. Aren't games addictive and unhealthy? Well, yes, games can be addictive. After all, you can spend many a night grinding away at World of Warcraft. But how many of you have also spent many a night sitting there reading a book until the wee hours, and you look and it's 3 o'clock and you just want to get through one more chapter? There's a lot of stuff that is addictive, and just like any of these other addictive things, it should be done within reason. Now, we wouldn't say, oh, you shouldn't read, that's addictive, and we know that it is. We know once you get started reading, you continue to read and read beyond when you should be sleeping. So just like any other activity, it needs to be done in small amounts. And that's why the model I present of having the gaming event is an easy answer to this question. You say, yes, well, this is why we only have this gaming event once a week, because that's when we're having gaming at the library. That's the difference between having that always-on gaming with the Xbox running all the time. I find that that fuels that particular fire. So if you're finding that issue come up, then one of your responses is to just create these special gaming events, because that's the time when you come together and play games, and you help to teach people about the balance of gaming and other things in their life. As far as unhealthy, well, sitting there playing a game is no less unhealthy than sitting there reading a book. It's the same problem. And if you're doing an action game like a Dance Dance Revolution or Guitar Hero or something, then you're actually being involved a little bit more. Okay, Guitar Hero, you'll get really strong fingers. But Dance Dance Revolution, you're jumping around. Wii Fit, you're getting involved. So there are games that actually can get you involved. But I think that's sidestepping the question. The question here is it addictive? Yes, it is, but we have lots of addictive stuff here at the library. So come and get addicted to the library. Okay, maybe you're not going to use that last tagline, but the idea is the same. Now, one of the questions might be, well, why do we spend resources on gaming? In these tough economic times, is this the time to be throwing away our money on games? And that's a tough question, and that's a question you have to think about. Is it the time to be tossing away money on games? You have to decide, do we feel that our resources being spent on gaming, if we spend this much on gaming, is it going to make everything else we do be more valuable? And this is where the whole tie-in to entrepreneurship comes in this class. The idea here is that you're being entrepreneurial because you're spending a little bit of money to get a greater number of people engaged with the large investments you already have in your library. And so that's the idea here, and that's, again, this sort of special event concept. Well, yeah, we're having this little thing, but what we find is when we do this, then a lot of people use all of this that we have access to. And that's the idea here, is that the gaming is tying into other things that we're doing at the library. The concept here is that we want gaming to just be another service. It's just something else we do. It's not something special. It's not something unique. It's just like books, just like everything else we do, it's another relevant service. Look at this picture. This is story time in the library. Now, do you see, this is not a quiet thing. You've got a lot of kids that are screaming and yelling. You've got some parents over that are watching and chatting with each other. You've got the guy in the back who is annoyed. You've got your 10% that are annoyed. Most public libraries would say storytelling draws in more people than anything else they do. But it's not about the stories. It's about the interaction. It's about what's going on between the people watching the story and that storyteller, and the interaction between the kids and each other, and the interaction between the parents. Now, remove the story time and replace it with gaming, and now you've got the activity for kids when they get too old for story time. Gaming is story time for the rest of us. Gaming allows us to interact with each other and tell stories. But rather than have someone tell us how the story goes, we get to make the story happen. And that's what's cool about gaming, is it's story time for everyone else. Here's another thing that's fairly popular in libraries. This is a coffee shop. Now, again, what does coffee have to do with books? Well, it's just something that you drink while you read books. It's a service that goes along with books. Coffee is a relevant service for a group of people who come in and then they get engaged with other things that are going on at the library. And so just like a cafe fits in a library because it complements it, just like story time fits in the library, gaming fits in the library as well. It's simply another relevant service. Now, the big last question I want to address is the legal question. Is it legal to do what we're doing with games? This is a sticky issue, and it's fairly complex. There's some discussion of it over here in the gaming toolkit, but here's the short answer. From looking at cases in the past, if we're using games to pursue these educational missions of the library, we're doing it for a nonprofit mission that fulfills the library's mission, then using board games and the activity of gaming is okay. We've got there's some case studies in the past where they found that people could have board games and use them in this way, and it's not infringing upon the rights of the designers of the board games. The challenge actually comes in music. So if you were playing a video game and there was no licensed music being played, that falls into lines with that gaming activity. But if you have licensed music that the game is using, that is where you run into the public performance issues. And that is where you have to follow the instructions by the game. Many games will tell you that you may or may not use this game for public performance. Now, I'll say Nintendo has been very helpful with libraries. Nintendo has said, yes, use our stuff, it's great. But we've been writing to Konami and some of the other people who do some of these other sorts of music action games and haven't gotten responses. We haven't yet gotten any sort of blanket saying, yes, it's great to do that. So because of that, you have to be aware that it may be illegal what you're doing, putting Guitar Hero up on the big screen if you're playing licensed music. The big question comes down to public performance of the music. Now, if a game has original music that came with the game and it's nothing licensed, that's not going to be a problem. The problem comes in when you put on Dance Dance Revolution or Guitar Hero or Rock Band and it's playing licensed music. That can be an issue. You have to read the end user license that comes with the game, and it will tell you if you can use a game for public performance. Nintendo has been great. Nintendo has said, use our Nintendo stuff and it's fine. So if you're playing a Nintendo game that's put out by Nintendo, it's not a problem. But you need to look at the end user license. And if it says no public performance, then legally you could have some issues from using these sorts of games in a public space where anyone can walk up and listen to the music. You can write the companies and ask them for permission. We actually had a lawyer come to the Gaming Learning Library Symposium, and that was his suggestion. He said libraries should write and ask permission. At this point that we don't have any sort of a blanket permission statement for libraries to use these sorts of licensed music products in their libraries. Now, the question is, would you really get in trouble doing it? Well, I don't know. I mean, this is something where I'm not going to say, no, you're not going to get in trouble, because there is a potential legal issue with using these games and broadcasting them in a library. If you are worried about it, then you want to use games that don't use licensed music, and you want to use board games and video games that don't get into that. But if you're going to use these things, one suggestion is to write the publishers and ask them. Ask them for permission to use the things. Even if you get no answer, the attempt that you made to ask them will be important in the courts. If you have any answer to this, please come over to the ALA Connect website and tell us, because this is something that we're struggling with. I know, so what some libraries done is they have bought the packaged license to play licensed music. And that covers some of the songs that are in these licensed packages. But even the question is, what's going to win out in the courts? That boxed license that allows you to do everything, or the CD that says you are not allowed to use this in a public space? I don't know. This is a case where we haven't really tested this stuff. So I can't give you a good, clean answer on this one because we don't have one. And when we did bring in a lawyer, his answer was write and ask permission. So that would be my advice as well. If you know you're going to use Guitar Hero or DDR and you know you're going to use it quite a bit in your library, I would say send off the letters and ask permission. Keep records of when you sent them and what you sent, and that way you've got that in case anything does happen. Part of it is a copyright argument in the courts comes down to what was lost. What fees were lost by using this material in this way? And it's going to be pretty easy to argue that using the material in a library space is actually not a loss at all, but rather it's marketing for the game. That you're using the game as it was presented and people can play it in the library and then they go home and they can buy a copy to play at home. And again, this is where using it in these events is going to be different than circulating. Now, circulating games is more likely to be okay because it's the same sort of thing that we're doing circulating anything else. It's the right of first sale. You buy something, you could lend it out. And so that's going to be okay. But it's this playing in public performance that can be a bit of a sticky issue. So I wish I had a better answer for you on this one, but sadly I don't. Watch the website where this video appeared. If I do get a better answer, I'll certainly point you to it there. So those are some of the common issues that I've run into in talking about games and libraries. If you have issues or answers to these issues, please head over to ALA Connect to share them. Tomorrow we're going to conclude the class. I'll talk about keeping up with gaming and wrap it all up into a nice shiny bundle. So until then, I'll see you later. Bye-bye.